Hey everyone, this is George Soto and you're watching Startups Unedited.
Jack Kosakowski tuning in from Scottsdale, Arizona. How you doing this morning?
I'm good, man. I'm just, trying to kick a cold from Sales Machine. So much excitement that I think I hit my nostrils and my chest. I'm good, man. It's 120 degrees today, so good thing I work from, my home office, right?
Absolutely. Well, you absolutely crushed it for Sales Hacker and Salesforce's Sales Machine conference there in New York. So kudos to you. You just really crushed it. So,
I'd say they crushed it, man. I mean, Tim Clark and, Max Altshuler, like there's no two guys or gals that can throw a party like that. I mean, it was, I call it the value party, right? For sales. It's just insane. I mean, on all levels. And I would highly suggest that, if you didn't catch it, they're going to have like an on-demand kind of thing for like 2 days where you can check out all the speakers from it. Seth Godin, Simon Sinek, Gary Vaynerchuk, and, a ton more. So definitely check it out when it goes online.
Awesome. And maybe we can do a little session there and share some of the highlights, maybe show some clips in the future.
Yeah. No, definitely. So yeah, man, I'm excited to be here. So let's do some chat, man. Whatever questions you have my way, and, hopefully the audience will get some value out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, why don't you take a second to kind of just explain a little bit about the Scottsdale startup ecosystem. We've been talking to folks and interviewing founders and VCs and others in these startup ecosystems around the world really over the last year or so, and rolled out a documentary recently, which we'll be releasing later in the year. Tell us a little bit about the Scottsdale, Arizona startup community, some of the highlights. What is it like to be there right now?
Yeah, so Business Insider came out with an article not too long ago, and it said that Scottsdale was like one of the, I don't know if we were number one or number two, but the fastest growing kind of tech startup communities. It's pretty cool. I think that Infusionsoft kind of started the way, right? Like Infusionsoft, I think about 6-7 years ago, they created this huge office in Chandler, Arizona. I mean, it's really, really cool. Like from a cultural standpoint, they've got like a football field on there and stuff. But my kind of entry into the startup world was with Acton Software. About 3 years ago, I had an opportunity to help be part of the opening of an office here in Scottsdale. So they were expanding to Scottsdale, and then now Salesforce, is not a startup by any means, but they've come out here. I mean, the list goes on. There's so many different tech startups and I would say most of them are really small, like, in the incubator stage, which is actually, to me, is really cool to see that.
Absolutely. What do you think is kind of some of the key attributes that the, startup community there has? Is it people love the fact that the weather is great and it's not snowy? Like, are there surrounding universities that are kind of feeding engineering or sales talent?
Right here, so, and actually I'm not even a Sun Devil, my wife is, so, but, I live 5 minutes from ASU, and I think ASU, it might be the biggest school now of the most students, or it's the second most to Ohio State, I believe. But I mean, yeah, there's tons of great millennial talent out here. 9 months out of the year, it's just beautiful weather. I think, just kind of the layout, right? It's not, we don't really have the big city feel. So I don't think that there's like one main area that everybody kind of, all the startups are kind of in, but Old Town Scottsdale's growing. I can't think of the name, Weebly, right? So Weebly's there. Zenefits is there. Oh man, I can't think of all of them on the top of my head, but there's just so many different ones that have kind of probably aggregated in the Old Town area. Is probably like the most dense piece, but I think there's got to be, tax breaks and things like that. I mean, it's so much cheaper to live in Scottsdale, and you get such a beautiful, I guess I shouldn't say just Scottsdale, but the Phoenix area. There's just so many beautiful areas. The cost of housing, to rent, to lease is really low comparable to like, San Francisco and all the bigger cities. So
yeah, absolutely. San Francisco is pretty atrocious. Let's talk a little bit about what it's truly like to be an entrepreneur. I think that a lot of the time folks get tied up into the sort of like glamorous, this I would say misconception that this life is glamorous and that, we're driving around in Ferraris and Tesla nowadays and all that kind of stuff. And there's certainly that element that exists, and there's plenty of successful people. And I think, life at some point or another will say, hey, listen, let's, the universe will make you successful and try hard enough. But what's the reality of being an entrepreneur early on?
I have to admit, I got a little bit lucky because I came on with a company to open up their US division of a, global component. But I will say that I was the first employee, right? So, I was brought on and, I'm given direction by the owner, Jason Sibley, but I'm, big equity owner. I have, some financial backing, but really everything in the direction and, building up from the start to, hopefully what will be a big finish, right, has all been on me. And I've never had, any of this stuff. Like, I'm learning as I go, right? Trial and error. I will say that it is a lot more stressful, right? Especially because we just hired, 2 employees. We've got 2 more coming on. So just from a people perspective, it's not, and I have to say I have great people, but, everybody's problem is your problem, right? When you work for a company, the only stress that you have is your own worries, right? You don't have to worry about everybody else. And, as an entrepreneur and kind of building something, I'm really worried about the people, right? I worry about that. Like, I want people to be happy. I want them to, do what they love. I don't, want people to feel like they come to work per se. So I think that's where, maybe that's a personal thing. And then the other thing is,
I'd argue that's great leadership, by the way, caring about your people.
I mean, it's the only thing, it's the only thing I know, and it's the only thing I'll ever know. But then it's just all the little things. I mean, like, figuring out bank accounts and health insurance and, all this little tedious stuff that, you never have thought about it, especially at scale, right? Because we're so small right now. But, at scale, I see, the other side of the business in Europe and kind of the things they go through. And I'm like, oh, I'm at the bottom of this. I can't imagine what's going to be like when, it just grows and grows and grows.
Totally. So really being able to kind of shift your mentality to think about others first and your team and building a great culture, I think is one of the cornerstones of being a business owner and an entrepreneur. And it's frankly one of the harder pieces, I think, because not everyone is wired to be as, I don't want to say empathetic or emotionally intelligent, but, some people are wired a little differently. So they have to kind of develop those skills. So I think that's really important. And to run an organization, it's got to be about the people, in my opinion, and not yourself. So let's talk a little bit about personal branding. I mean, you're like the guru, man. You just like exploded on the scene. You were like, who's that guy hitting the home runs and throwing the touchdowns? It's like, it's Jack.
It's powerful, man. I mean, it's, this business that I've created, right? I mean, it's all inbound business and all inbound, leads and conversations because of the visibility and the value that I've brought to social, right? And I kind of had a jump start, right, with brand at Acton, which, helped me kind of elevate quickly, I guess you could say. But I mean, I really believe, I'm not a huge fan of always bringing up like a Gary Vaynerchuk type scenario, but Joe Paluzzi and Gary Vaynerchuk, I think are 2 guys that I really look at from a business model perspective because, Gary Vaynerchuk runs his business strictly on his own organic, personal brand. If you look at Joe Paluzzi from Content, CMI, he just sold his company for $30 million. I mean, I would tell you that most people don't even know who CMI is. They know who Joe is. So they're great models, I think, for what I think the future of business is, right? Just it's all about the people, right? Nobody buys into a logo anymore. I mean, I'm not even sold on like Apple, right? Like I truly believe that, people might have used to buy into the Apple brand, but now you're seeing all these up and comers, especially in the startup phase. Like if you want to take out the enterprise, it's not a brand that's going to take out an enterprise. It's a person that's going to take out an enterprise, right? And you got to go fast. You got to go furious. You got to go, super value focused. Everything you do has to be about the people that are, and building advocates and being advocates for them. And then the business piece that's just kind of the upside of all of it, right? And I think most startup owners, they say, oh, I'm going to build a really good product. Well, that's great. But if you build a product and you don't have an audience for it, and nobody knows, how great the brains are behind the product, you're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of money trying to get people to understand that. So, if you're a young entrepreneur, what I would highly suggest is focus on building your brand, focus on building your audience, strictly based on the value of you, what you bring to the table, and then worry about building this fantastic product. It's a lot easier. I mean, I've lived it. I kind of fell into it without even knowing that I was gonna fall into it, right?
So what channels, let's say on social media, should I be focused on early days? So I'm a founder who's like building some, let's say, marketing technology or HR technology, whatever the app is or SaaS product that I'm focused on. Well, like what should I, like, what's my first couple steps? Is it set up my Twitter handle and start blogging? Like, what would you say?
Well, first, figure out what your value is, right? Because your value might not be necessarily your product, right? You might have built and partnered with somebody that's got a great, background, and they understand HR way better than you do, and you're going to be the kind of the business brains. So figure out what your value is. If you're selling an HR product or you're building one and that's what you want to do, it doesn't mean that you have to, be the thought leader in the HR space. Be the thought leader in, business development, right? If you're really good at that, or just the brains behind, some component of business. Figure out your niche, and then go create your Twitter handle, and then go create the content. I think so many people are just confused as to what the true value is they bring, and they have no consistency across their social channels to actually build an engaged long-term kind of personal brand that's going to get business benefits.
So what you're saying, if I'm clear on this, is let's say we have a SaaS, software as a service, health tech, tool, let's say. So as opposed to, let's say, trying to brand yourself as a, healthcare specialist or all the employees at your company, when we're talking about social selling and that sort of stuff, and employee advocacy programs, instead of just, branding ourselves as healthcare experts, really being able to brand ourselves, if I'm a salesperson, around like being a really great sharer of sales content. If I'm an accounting person, talk about more accounting, of course, as an employee at this health tech company. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah. I mean, and you have to, I think in the beginning of a personal brand is you kind of have to stick with one thing, and you have to become a trusted advisor for something that's very niche, right? Because you got to build your audience kind of like one piece at a time, right? And you can't just be focused on, I'm going to go out and just get everybody to like me and, see my value. Is, build your strategy around one niche area, right? Use those hashtags on Twitter, write only content in that realm, right? And then as you kind of build your audience, what I did was I only talked about social selling for a really, really long time, right? Even though, I think I'm pretty good at sales, right? So social selling is only one component of a sales process. So then as I evolved, kind of built my credibility in that space, right, of social selling, then I kind of, branched out to social media a little bit, sales, and, now I'm slowly evolving into bigger topics, trying to get more into like leadership conversations and so forth. But you kind of have to, you have to be focused, right? Build an audience, and you got to build the right audience. And sometimes when I say right audience, it means if you sell to HR professionals, it doesn't mean you have to write about HR, because HR professionals are not just reading about HR. Like, let's be honest, right? So you just got to figure out a topic that you're good at, and then bring those people over to you, through value, engagement, proactive versus reactive kind of approach, and be patient, patient, consistent, and, over time, things will start to happen.
Awesome. Jack, well, thank you so much for tuning in. You're absolutely fearless. You're a rock star. If folks want to follow you on social, speaking of social, what handles should they follow you on, and what should they be looking forward to experiencing with your content?
Yeah, I'm at Jack Kosakowski 1. You can go to my website, jackkosakowski.com, creationagency.com if you're looking for marketing automation services, anything digital marketing, social selling. I'm always down for a conversation. I'm not one that I'm not one to pitch anybody anything. I don't beg for business. So if you just want to have a conversation and see if I can help you or you can help me, whatever, I'm all about getting connected, right? Networking and figuring out, what value I can bring, to anyone out there.
Awesome. Well, have a great day, and I'll see you in Scottsdale soon. We got to do Startups Unedited in Scottsdale.
I'm ready.
See you later.
Book your plane ticket.
We're editing some of the documentary now, and I'll definitely reach out soon.
All right, man. Great talking with you.
Have a great day. Thanks, man.